You're mid-sentence and your body betrays you. A small, sharp sound jumps out of your throat without permission, then another, then another. You hold your breath, you drink water upside down, you let someone scare you. Nothing works, and then suddenly, on its own schedule, it stops. Hiccups feel like a glitch, a small malfunction in an otherwise smooth machine. But they're not a malfunction. They're a 370-million-year-old reflex you inherited from a fish. And every time you hiccup, you are very briefly breathing the way a tadpole breathes. Most people assume hiccups are a stomach problem. You ate too fast, you drank something fizzy, your diaphragm got irritated. That's the obvious answer, and it's not exactly wrong. But it doesn't explain the strangest thing about hiccups, which is that they shouldn't exist at all. They serve no purpose in a human body. They don't clear your airway, they don't help you digest, they don't protect you from anything. Evolution is ruthless about deleting useless reflexes, and yet this one has survived in every mammal that's ever been studied, in roughly the same form for hundreds of millions of years. The real answer to why you hiccup is far stranger than a bit of trapped air. The answer is that the wiring of tadpoles and lungfish is still running inside you, and once in a while, it switches on. To see what's actually happening when you hiccup, you have to slow it down. A hiccup is two events glued together. First, your diaphragm, the big sheet of muscle under your lungs, contracts sharply and pulls air in. About 35 milliseconds later, the glottis at the top of your throat slams shut. That snap shut is the hic. The whole thing takes less than 1/10 of a second, and you have absolutely no control over any of it. It runs on a circuit in your brainstem, the oldest, most primitive part of your nervous system, the part you share with reptiles, with frogs, with fish. In 2003, a French neurologist named Christian Straus, working at the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris, published a paper with a quietly radical title. He called it The Evolutionary Origin of Hiccup and Its Counterpart Among Vertebrates. Straus and his team had spent years studying breathing reflexes in patients with neurological disorders. And they noticed something nobody wanted to take seriously. The motor pattern of a human hiccup, the timing, the muscles involved, the order they fire in, is almost identical to the motor pattern that tadpoles use to breathe through their gills. Think about that for a second. A tadpole doesn't have lungs yet. To breathe, it pulls water into its mouth by contracting muscles that are the evolutionary ancestor of your diaphragm. Then it snaps shut a flap at the back of its throat, the glottis, so that the water is forced sideways, out through the gills, instead of going down into the developing lungs. Pull in, snap shut. Pull in, snap shut. That's gill breathing. That's also, beat for beat, a hiccup. Strauss's argument was that the neural circuit for hiccuping isn't a mistake. It's a fossil. It's the same brainstem circuit that once told an aquatic ancestor how to breathe water, preserved across hundreds of millions of years because it kept getting reused for something else. In amphibians like frogs, the same circuit helps the animals switch between breathing through skin and gills underwater and breathing through lungs on land. In mammals, including you, that circuit got recycled one more time. It became the reflex that protects newborns from inhaling milk. That's the part that ties it directly to you. When you were a few months old and nursing, the same brainstem circuit was firing constantly. Babies hiccup enormously. Fetuses hiccup in the womb starting at about 9 weeks, sometimes for an hour at a time. Ultrasound studies from University College London have shown unborn babies hiccuping hundreds of times a day, and researchers there, led by Kimberly Whitehead in 2019, found that each hiccup sends a huge burst of signal up into the developing brain. Their theory is that fetal hiccups are how the brain learns where the diaphragm is. They're a tutorial. The baby is mapping its own body. And in newborns, the hiccup reflex has a second job. It coordinates the suckle. When a baby latches and swallows, the glottis has to close at exactly the right millisecond to keep milk out of the lungs. That precise pull and snap timing, it's the same circuit. The same ancient tadpole rhythm repurposed to keep a mammal infant from drowning in its own dinner. The problem is that once you're an adult, you don't need it anymore. You're not a tadpole, you're not a fetus, you're not nursing. But the circuit is still there, sitting quietly in your brainstem, and certain things will set it off. A stomach that's distended from eating too fast, a sudden change in temperature, like a cold drink hitting a warm esophagus. Alcohol, stress, a nerve in your chest called the vagus, which runs right past your diaphragm, getting irritated by anything from carbonation to a tight belt. When any of these poke the old circuit, it does what it was built to do 370 million years ago. It pulls air in and slams the door. This is also why the cures are so weird and why none of them really work. Holding your breath, breathing into a paper bag, swallowing a spoonful of sugar, these are all attempts to override the brainstem with a stronger signal. Sometimes you can. A spike of carbon dioxide in your blood from holding your breath tells the breathing circuit to reset. Sugar on the back of the tongue floods the vagus nerve with a competing input. Getting scared dumps adrenaline into the system. But the reflex is older than your willpower, and most of the time it just runs until it's done. Most hiccups last a few minutes. Some don't. The longest recorded case belongs to an Iowa farmer named Charles Osborne, who started hiccuping in 1922 after slaughtering a hog and didn't stop until 1990. 68 years, an estimated 430 million hiccups. He got married twice, had 8 children, and hiccuped through all of it. Doctors believe a tiny blood vessel in his brainstem had ruptured and damaged the exact spot that controls the reflex, leaving it stuck in the on position. The circuit was so deeply wired, so far below conscious control that even a man who desperately wanted it to stop could not switch it off. The tadpole inside him just kept breathing. And here's the twist. Scientists used to assume that something so useless in adults would eventually disappear. Reflexes that don't earn their keep get pruned. But the hiccup circuit hasn't been pruned because it's load-bearing. The same neurons that make you hiccup are also part of the network that controls your normal breathing rhythm, your swallowing, your cough, your gag reflex. You can't delete the hiccup without unraveling the whole brainstem, so evolution left it in. The cost is a few embarrassing minutes at dinner. The benefit is that you can breathe at all. Which means the next time it happened, and the next time you're talking to someone and your chest jumps and that small, ridiculous sound escapes, you're not malfunctioning. You're running a piece of code that predates trees, predates dinosaurs, predates the moment any of your ancestors first crawled out of the water and decided to try the air. Inside the wiring of every person you've ever met, a tadpole is still breathing. Every so often, it remembers how. Sit with that for a second. The body you live in isn't really yours. It's a 370 million year old hand-me-down, patched and repurposed, and never quite finished. And the parts of it you find most annoying, the hiccups, the goosebumps, the shiver, the yawn, are usually the oldest parts. The parts that have been with you the longest. The parts that, in a strange way, are the most you there is.